Hello and welcome to a very special conversation. We have joining with us Dr. Subramanian Swamy, BJP leader. He's an MP of the Rajya Sabha, but more than that, he's an entity in his own right. There are many ways to describe Dr. Swamy, but I think I'll go with my favorite guest and NewsX's favorite guest also. So welcome to this conversation, Dr. Swamy, seeing you for the first time after lockdown. So I hope you're ready to go with all the last 2 months we haven't heard you speak. So I'm going to first of all begin with you're taking on the Under Secretary of the UN. I think they've issued a note against you saying, accusing you of hate speech. They've accused you of making a speech saying that you don't consider Muslims to be equal to all Hindus. You think all citizens are not equal. Would you care to clarify on that one?
Well, he hasn't quoted a source. And therefore, I don't know whether he made it up or somebody told him and he just thought that he doesn't have to do a fact check. It's all very unbecoming of a United Nations senior official. I myself, for a brief while served on the Economic Division of the United Nations in New York. I know how strict things were in terms of what you can say and what you can't say. But anyway, this issue has been now boiling at many places. The Prime Minister of Pakistan, Mr. Imran Khan, also went on a press conference and said that I had said this and this showed the mentality of the BJP. And here too he says this. Now, I have never said anything that has been attributed to me by the Secretary General.
So
there was an interview earlier for Imran Khan that was by a Pakistani company, which I didn't know at that time was Pakistani owned. That was a Canadian company in Toronto, which came here through introductions of other journalists, I should give them an interview. And they took a 2-hour interview and promised to send me a tape of the entire interview. Otherwise, I would have taped it myself. And they never did. But they took a statement of mine and spliced it. And I'll tell you what I said, and I said this in Parliament too. That Article 14 guaranteeing equality between citizens has been pronounced upon by the Supreme Court a number of times, and that too with very large number of judges, sometimes 9 judges, sometimes 7 judges. These are constitutional benches. And they have held repeatedly, because this matter had kept coming up, that the article of equality before the Constitution, before the law, is of equality of equals and not equality in general. And then they went on to give an example, and I can give you one example just now, and you will immediately see the sense of that. I, as a Brahmin, cannot today say that I should also get reservations in jobs and in universities because I am equal to scheduled caste in terms of my rights under the Constitution or Article 14. And therefore, if they get reservations, I must also get reservations. Now, obviously, this is something which people find ridiculous when pointed out. And similarly, when Antule was prosecuted by a special court, Antule went to the Supreme Court and an 11-judge bench decided that since he was Chief Minister and since he had swallowed public money, therefore he has to be treated on a different level from other criminals who have done some robbery or or any heinous crimes. So therefore they said that this Article 14 cannot apply blandly to every citizen on an equal basis. So I said, when you compare a Hindu coming from Pakistan, who is being subject to enormous persecution, so like Christians also, Sikhs and Buddhists and Parsis, they were in that category. And Muslims were not there, because we cannot have a category of Muslim in Pakistan coming to India because he is being religiously persecuted by the Islamic forces in our Islamic government in Pakistan. So therefore, there was no Muslim at all. And therefore, you can't bring in Article 14 because this is the people of other religions who are suffering persecution cannot be compared with those who abide by the state religion of a country. So this is what I had said, and I said it in Parliament. no one questioned me on it. But this interviewer took that and cut and spliced it, where I said that, Muslims, I said Muslims of Pakistan cannot be equated with the Hindus who have come as refugees due to persecution. They cut all that and said Muslims cannot be considered equal to Hindus in India. And this has gone huge circulation. Really surprised that the Undersecretary General fell for it. And he is in charge of a special thing about human rights and genocide and so on. He's got that portfolio. And from Senegal. And I think there's no alternative that unless he withdraws that statement saying I was misled, and then I'm sorry for it, I will have to go to court. And whether he gets a privilege of not attending court because he's a United Nations official, that also is subject to a discretion of the Secretary General. And I have today moved my ministry, that is our government's ministry, External Affairs. I've written a letter to the Foreign Secretary to take it up with our permanent representative in New York and bring it to the notice of the Undersecretary General that you have committed a big mistake, and that is that you have not fact-checked what you have relied on.
And a bigger mistake in taking you on, I think, Dr. Swamy. Well, what is Dr. Swamy without a controversy? I'm going to move on.
No, that's true. I know my law, and I've never lost a defamation case, either filed against me or filed against somebody else. And I've got even Congress party office bearers to apologize for calling me names. So I know the law very well, and I don't like this kind of thing, you see. Because what you are essentially trying to do is create hate in the name of prosecuting hate. You want to, this happened with me at Harvard too. All the left wing got together.
I
they
remember.
didn't get a chance to appear before the catalog committee and explain what I actually wrote.
Correct.
But they added, all the mirch masala, and amongst themselves decided without a proper quorum, without notice, without informing anybody. So, I mean, this has become now the liberals' favorite method. Talk about human rights, talk about equality, talk about law, talk about the constitution. But when they come to start hunting, they just forget everything of that. And this is very, very bad. And I don't think that this is a matter that I'm going to let go very easily.
I said you're raring to go, and usually you mention liberals somewhere halfway down the interview, but now we've begun straight with the liberals attack. So I can see this is really fresh and you're ready to go. But I'm going to take you to another topic. We are we've been talking about the COVID virus. I've been reading your take on the economic packages. First of all, what do you think of what the government has offered, and in return, what would you suggest instead?
See, first you must know what you are up against. And that clarity is not there in the finance ministry. I will blame the Prime Minister. It's not the Prime Minister's job to know everything. I don't know physics, I don't know biology. So if somebody said I'm ignorant of physics and biology, I wouldn't mind it, and I would refer it, I will defer it to somebody. If it is a matter of health, I would defer it to Harshvardhan, who's one of the finest people in our government today. So that's why we have got such a low death rate in this coronavirus pandemic. Now, what is the issue? Over the last 4 years, our economy has been declining. And I've been saying it's in a tailspin. I've written articles almost every year. I wrote, after the budget, I wrote in an op-ed in the Hindu newspaper.
Yes.
And some other papers I've written in your Sunday Guardian, which is also part of your NewsX. Now, by the time the coronavirus struck, our economy had already slid down to below 4% growth rate. And consequently, you have not only the damage being done because of the lockdown, but you have to now deal with the structural issues which can put this back on again on a path of growth. This is one aspect. The second aspect is, what is the problem with the economy that needs to be specially dealt with? The problem has been because of the hangover of the UPA policies, the Raghuram Rajan's madness to go on raising interest rates, income tax, tax terror, GST, the whole gamut of it, there was a serious demand crunch. People were not investing. Households were, not saving in banks anymore. They were either going to mutual funds or they were keeping it at home. And then you had this
Demonetization.
most unstructured, unprepared for demonetization, which threw the economy into a real serious problem. So all this essentially came down to the decline in demand. That's why before the coronavirus, you found automobiles were not being sold. There was inventory growing in everything. So you have to tackle this problem, how to deal with the demand. Now, after the coronavirus, people have, not getting salaries. So the demand problem has become even bigger. Okay. And then you have this poor, unfortunate people called the migrant labor. They are on a daily wage and suddenly they are getting nothing. And they don't even have money to pay fare to catch a train. And so many of them are walking, dying, some being run over on a railway track because there is no place to sleep on the night except on a clearing, which is the railway train. And somebody misleads them, saying that no train is coming for 8 hours, so they think they can have an 8-hour nap. So this problem has not been addressed, and particularly because there's a very large number of people who are going walking, and they are village to village. It's like Dandi March of Mahatma Gandhi. It is evoking people to sympathy. And in this situation, today's Economic Times says that the Finance Ministry says, and if I can quote from it on the front page, where is the data on migrants? I don't even have a basis, and I won't know how to reach them institutionally. It's a problem which all of us feel, but we can't do anything.
This is your finance minister.
This is the finance minister, and it's not my paper. It is the Times of India, which is very pro.
No, I was not giving the pronoun to the paper. I was giving the pronoun to the finance minister. You are finance minister, sir.
Yes, she is. But I tell you, in a democratic world, the party binds you only to those resolutions passed by the national executive. You can't say that every day. You only must see who's in government and what they say, and start becoming their agents unless you have some special interests. And so I'm saying that the government today has come out with a package which the Prime Minister said would be about 10%, a little more than 10%. Instead of 20 lakh crores, it is 20.97 lakh crores. Now, in that, 14 consulting companies, foreign, have yesterday given a statement together. It has been collected. I think it's put in one of the papers on the front page, all the 14. And they say that out of this package, for demand or stimulus is for demand. You just hand over money. The other things are credit, then whether there'll be a basis for giving loans or not. All these are being relaxed. These enabling you to produce. Why should anybody produce in this situation when there are going to be no buyers? If you give automobile industry money, what is the point? They have got all their parking lots full of cars which have not been sold.
Exactly.
So, therefore, our problem today is that the Finance Ministry has misunderstood the whole situation, and they have gone on this giving bonanzas to the industry. They have not understood that this country is driven by consumers, and most of the democratic countries are driven by consumers. Consumers are today in a terrible spot. Middle class is in a very bad spot because they have taken loans which they have to pay installments, and there is still, whatever statements come, they're still being harassed by banks to pay. So I think what we have today is, while I
Sorry, we lost you.
Congratulations, such a low death rate in coronavirus, and they have done a very good job. But as far as the economy is concerned, we have a declining economy, which is going to hit the ground in a crash, and we don't have an antidote in terms of correct economic policy to rescue us. So therefore, the Prime Minister will have to take a very serious call in July, June, July, and August. Otherwise, we may have a situation which will be 10 times as bad as what happened in 1930 in United States and European countries.
But take a call, what exactly do you mean? Change the finance minister or go in for some harsher reforms, faster reforms, the way you did in 91?
Well, you see, in 91, I was in charge of finance, even though I was not finance minister.
I remember, yes.
Mr. Modi, Mr. Chandrasekhar told me, if I make you finance minister, you'll open everybody's bank account. So I'll give you all there, I'll make you the senior most minister, and nothing will happen without you. And whatever you want to, you can do. So that time, that kind of power will I get? I mean, people say, oh, you're unhappy, you're not finance minister. Anybody can tell me that I've asked them, please make me finance minister. Nobody can say that. The Prime Minister certainly can't say, I've never met him to say, make me finance minister. And the country thinks that I'm qualified in finance and mathematical economics. So I should become, so this all over Twitter. But I never answered that Twitter saying that you are right. So I'm saying that this is what I'm telling you today is not because I want to be finance minister. But you need a finance minister who is politically strong and knows the macroeconomics, because this microeconomics, demand and supply. I mean, it's a very dangerous thing, because economy is a integrated macro framework. That is why Raghuram Rajan turned out to be such a flop, because he raised interest rates saying they'll cut money supply, therefore inflation will be controlled. But at the same time, the cost of capital went up, the small and medium industry started holding up, unemployment began to increase. This same mistake was done by the US president in 1925, when in order to win an election, he persuaded the unions to cut the wages voluntarily by 10% and promised them that it will raise it after the election. But by cutting it by 10%, employment did not increase, as was expected in microeconomics, because if labor has become cheap, people will employ more. But it didn't happen because the purchasing power also went down, so industries closed down, so the unemployment was much larger than before. So the exact opposite happens to common sense. So economics is a science where when you're dealing with macroeconomics, you can't predict how it will go unless you've taken all the variables into account.
So what is your solution? Print more cash is what I heard you say once.
My view is that you empower various people by various methods. Start building eight-lane highways from Delhi to Madras, Delhi to Calcutta, Delhi to Bombay. Start building it. Start paying them wages for doing work on that. So that's a lower class. Same thing with building village roads. Give it to all the legless laborers money. Just give them cash. And where is the cash going to come from? Well, originally they said, well, we need $8-9 trillion. I said, there's the Reserve Bank sitting with money of the banks, which is about $8 trillion. And now that has become part of the package. And so money is not, today we don't have any gold standard. So there's nothing to stop you from printing money. But be careful, if you print money and there's not enough production, then there'll be inflation. But if there's excess capacity, then putting money into the hands of people who then go and start buying, go to the kirana shop, go to the restaurant, and so on, that booms the economy. And this is the message that John Maynard Keynes gave to the US president in 1930, and that's how they came out of the Depression. Now that elementary message has not come, and we get all these experts from abroad. They are not economists, they are in finance, or they are in drug companies, and they come here and then they become economic advisors and make a mess. Today, our economic advisor talking about thali. What is this thali business? When you don't have katori, what's the use of having a thali? So therefore, we need people who are glued to the soil of this country, who breathe Bharatiyata, and that kind of person who knows the intricacies of macroeconomics. That is the kind of person we are. And if you don't want me, but you want somebody else, please ask me. I'll try to do a search and find out if there is anybody who can be a better finance minister than those we had the last 6 years.
Fair enough. And can I say welcome back also? That was a very candid speech from you. The other, another of your pet subjects is China. How do we deal with China? I've also heard you say that Trump is using China bashing because it's going to help him. He's got a re-election coming up, the way our chaps perhaps use Pakistan. But how should India handle China?
See, despite the fact it's our neighbor, despite the fact that for 1,200 years at least, we have had communication, interaction. Our sadhus have gone to China, like to Shaolin, and taught them what they call as wushu, which then the Japanese called it as karate, and now that karate has come back to India as if we are importing that thing. So there are many things. The scholars from China came to this country and they wanted our Sanskrit documents, they wanted to learn Buddhism and so many. So there's a long history. We never had any conflict. Europe was fighting every day. Every country was fighting with every country for centuries. But ours for more than 1,200 years. We never fought. I think our relationship go back to 2,500 years. And we have not, except 1962. And 1962, what really happened is still a secret because the Henderson Brooks report, Henderson Brooks was an Indian, by then Anglo-Indian, and therefore he has this strange name. But his report has still not been declassified. I nearly got it declassified by Parikar, but then Mr. Jaitley said, no, it will hurt a lot of people, so it should not be released. It should be released. So we know what is 62. 62 is not pure perfidy of China. There are many things that China did was wrong. That's a different matter. But today we have to look at the national interest. You've got a neighbor, and do you want to be friends with them or don't want to be friends with them? Americans, I know them very well. They are pure cost-benefit analysis. Even their marriages are based on cost-benefit analysis. So if they want something from you, they are friends with you, provided you give them that and take what you want. For instance, they told us, please take Afghanistan over.
I think we're having a slight problem with your audio.
It is yours. We'll give you any amount of weapons. All this. We can never send troops abroad. And so what did the Americans do? They went and made up with Pakistan and Taliban and handed over Afghanistan to Taliban. And Taliban and Pakistan together will be a real menace for us. So I'm saying, please do an analysis. What is important for your security? Can the Chinese be your friends ever? According to me, yes. And what is my proof? Well, I have not been officially dealing with them except in a brief moment when I was Commerce Minister. But with Morarji Desai, I was a de facto minister.
When you opened the Kailash Mansarovar.
So what I found is, and I asked them to open Kailash Mansarovar, Morarji had taken a bet with me, they'll never agree. And Vajpayee also said, "Tum bigad rahe ho hamare rishte, ye sare sawal uthakar wo to communist country hai, kaise manegi?" And what happened? They agreed. And they never closed it. Then trade agreement didn't agree for 9 years. And I went as Commerce Minister. Within 15 minutes of my arrival, they held a meeting and I signed it. And they signed it. So that's how trade started with them. So they are emotional people. Don't think they are inscrutable people, very calculating, nothing.
But my point is, after Wuhan,
the Americans, not the Chinese.
But after Wuhan, after also speculation, which I think you also seem to agree that this lab was virus made. The virus was lab made. Sorry.
Who did the research in Wuhan? The Chinese, the Americans, and the Indians. Who in India did it? Illegally, Tata Institute of Fundamental Research. And where did they do? They were observers in Wuhan, and they conducted the research with the American Defense Department and Wuhan University in Nagaland, Chamkadud. as it's called, the bats.
Bat.
There are a lot of bats in Nagaland. So they did a research there. And I brought it out. The Hindu newspaper published it. And now the government says we never knew about it and there's an inquiry on. But we have not publicized it. So in this question, who's guilty? Where will you start? And you have to have some evidence when you're going to make a huge charge that the Chinese deliberately killed so many people all over the world for their supremacy. I think if that's true, that's very condemnable. But how do I know it's true? Has there been any discussion? Have we used our friendship? We made so much. The Chinese, Xi Jinping came here, put him on a jula, and we gave him dhansak. Not dhansak. We gave them all the Gujarati dishes. Then took him to Tamil Nadu, and there they spent 2 days together. So, but ultimately, what came out? And I'm saying that with the Chinese, if you think that they have taken our territory, I know that one place they have no right to take even an inch. That is not in Aksai Chin, it's in Arunachal. Because that McMahon line, which they say is an imperialist line to us, the same line they have accepted for Burma. So if they can accept it for Burma, they have to accept it for India. So they only leave the Aksai Chin part. And there the Chinese are very political people. And if you are friends with them, there are many things. If they can do Kailash Mansarovar, I think they can even leave.
So, in this post-COVID, we're totally out of time. So, I want to just ask you, post-COVID, where should India be? Should we take the US line against China, or as you seem to be suggesting, take our own line with China?
We are there. There's only 3 countries who can be stably together. One is Israel, India, and then China. These 3 countries must come together. We are all in Asia. And with the United States, we should have a give and take relationship, but should never be part of a pact because you will be a junior partner. And with China, reason with them, get tough where you have to, you're capable, they have long communication lines, but we must strive to have good terms with China and isolate them from Pakistan on our interests. POK cannot be taken back unless the Chinese become neutral.
Wow. Just for that, I'm going to end now, but I also know that you're very fluent in Mandarin. So can you send a message for the Chinese in their own language as a last before we close? Can you want more? No, I want you to translate that.
I will tell you something which makes everybody laugh. I've said it many times. That means do not be afraid of the gods. Do not be afraid of the devil, but do be afraid of the foreigner who can speak Chinese. So, because such a tough language that people who learn it must have got some ulterior motive. That's what the Chinese take.
So, what is your motive is something I'm going to
laugh.
Then what is your motive? You are the foreigner who's speaking Chinese.
I wanted to study Chinese economy. I've studied it. That's why I laugh when people say US companies will leave China and come to India. They don't understand. The US is there as a facilitator, not as a investor. How can they come to India when they can't? We have no provision for their facilitation of us. Semi-processed goods come from pro-US countries like Taiwan and Japan and South Korea and so on. They come to China. China does value upgrading, puts in the final product like Lenovo, comes as a base, and then they put the keyboard in China, they put the screen in China, and then put the case, and then put Lenovo made in China. And so is iPhone also, except that iPhone made a condition you can't say made in China, but it's mostly made in China. And that means that they have to import from East Asia, add value, and sell it to the West. Are you in a position to do that? We got lousy infrastructure, we got lousy laws, and the East Asians tell me would love to come to India because you're a democracy, but life in India is impossible. It takes you 1 week to turn a ship around in Bombay port, whereas in 4 hours the Singaporeans are able to turn around a ship and send it onward. So therefore you improve your thing, you remove your corruption, we'll all come, but not before that.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Swami. A very candid and I think a very message of the times, really, both in geopolitical and I would say economic terms. Very refreshing to hear from you. Thank you so much for talking to us.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.